The alarm sounded just as Jake Morrison was finishing his coffee. He looked up from the captain's chair of the Wanderer, his small cargo ship, and saw the flashing red light on the control panel. Ben Carter, his co-pilot, was already checking the sensors with a frown on his face. "What is it?" Jake asked, setting down his mug and moving closer to the controls. "Distress signal," Ben replied. "Weak one. Coming from the asteroid field about 2 hours off our current route." He tapped the screen, pulling up more information. "Strange frequency, though. Not standard for any human vessels." Jake leaned over to look at the readings. The signal was indeed faint, barely registering on their equipment. It pulsed in an irregular pattern that their computer couldn't identify. He felt a tug in his chest, the same feeling he always got when someone needed help. "We should check it out," Jake said. Ben turned to look at him with raised eyebrows. "Jake, we're already 3 days behind schedule. The colony on Proxima 7 is expecting this cargo. If we detour now, we'll add at least another day to the trip." "Someone's in trouble out there," Jake insisted. From the engine room, Lisa Hayes called out through the intercom. "I vote we go. Can't leave someone stranded, boss." Ben sighed and shook his head, but he was already plotting the new course. "You're both too soft-hearted for this business. You know that, right?" Jake smiled. "Maybe, but I wouldn't have it any other way." The Wanderer changed direction, heading toward the asteroid field in the Kepler sector. This part of space was mostly uncharted, with dense clusters of rocks and ice that made navigation difficult. Most ships avoided it, preferring the safer established routes. That made Jake wonder what kind of ship would be out here in the first place. As they got closer, the signal grew slightly stronger. Their sensors began picking up debris, small pieces of metal, and what looked like organic material floating between the asteroids. Ben carefully guided the ship through the field, avoiding the larger rocks while following the signal's source. "There," Jake pointed at the view screen. "See that?" Wedged between two massive asteroids was a ship unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was small, maybe half the size of the Wanderer, with smooth curves instead of the hard angles of human ships. The hull had an organic quality to it, almost like it had been grown rather than built. Panels along its surface flickered with a dim blue light, barely visible. "I've never seen a design like that," Ben said quietly. "Not in any database." "Scan for life signs," Jake ordered. Lisa ran the scans from her station in the engine room. "I'm picking up one life form, very faint. Whatever's in there is barely alive." Jake didn't hesitate. "Get us close. We're bringing them aboard." "Jake, we don't know what that thing is," Ben protested. "It could be dangerous." "It's dying," Jake said firmly. "That's all I need to know." Ben knew better than to argue when Jake used that tone. He maneuvered the Wanderer alongside the damaged vessel, matching its slow drift through the asteroid field. Lisa suited up and went outside to attach a boarding tube to the alien ship's hull. It took her nearly an hour to find a way to connect their systems, and even then, she wasn't sure if the seal would hold. Jake and Ben waited in the airlock as Lisa worked to open the alien ship's hatch. When it finally opened, a rush of strange-smelling air came through. It wasn't toxic according to their sensors, just different. The smell reminded Jake of rain on metal. Inside the alien ship, everything was dim. The blue lights were dying, and most of the systems had shut down. Jake moved carefully through the cramped interior, following the life sign readings on his handheld scanner. The ship's design was beautiful in its own way, with flowing lines and controls that seemed to respond to touch rather than buttons or switches. He found the alien in what appeared to be the cockpit, slumped over in a seat that molded to its body. The creature was small, maybe 4 feet tall if it stood up. Its skin was pale blue, almost translucent, and Jake could see veins of darker blue running beneath the surface. Large eyes, closed now, dominated its face. They had multiple facets like an insect's eyes, but were far more complex. The alien wore a suit covered in symbols that Jake couldn't read. Some of the symbols were glowing red, which couldn't be good. His scanner beeped urgently. "Radiation poisoning. Severe." "Lisa, I need you in here now," Jake called through his radio. "Bring the medical kit and the portable containment field." Together, they carefully moved the alien back to the Wanderer. It was lighter than Jake expected, and its body felt cool to the touch even through his gloves. They placed it in the medical bay, which was really just a small room with a bed and some basic equipment. Their ship wasn't designed for this kind of thing. Lisa immediately started working, her engineer's mind adapting to the challenge. She rigged up sensors to monitor the alien's vital signs, though she had to guess at what some of the readings meant. The creature's biology was completely different from anything human. "Its breathing is all wrong," Lisa said, studying the monitors. "I think it processes oxygen differently than we do. And look at this." She pointed to another reading. "Its blood chemistry is way off. There's too much of something, or not enough. I can't tell which." Jake watched the alien's chest rise and fall in shallow, irregular breaths. "What can we do?" Lisa bit her lip, thinking hard. "I need to figure out what its body needs. Give me access to the alien ship's computer. Maybe there's medical data there." Ben spent the next several hours trying to interface with the alien ship's systems. The technology was far beyond human understanding in some ways, but he managed to extract some data files. Lisa pored over them, using the ship's computer to try to translate the information. "I think I've got something," she finally said. "This species needs a specific mineral compound to filter toxins from their blood. Without it, the radiation poisoning will kill them in a matter of hours." "Do we have anything like that?" Jake asked. Lisa checked their cargo manifest. "Maybe. We're hauling raw materials to the colony. There's some rare earth elements in there. If I can synthesize the right compound." She trailed off. "Already running." 3 days passed before the alien opened its eyes. Jake was sitting in the medical bay, reading reports on his tablet, when he heard a soft sound. He looked up and found himself staring into the alien's large, multifaceted eyes. They were incredible, shifting through shades of blue and purple as they focused on him. The alien tried to sit up but was too weak. Jake gently placed a hand on its shoulder, making calming gestures. "Easy there, you're safe. You were badly hurt, but you're going to be okay." The alien made a series of clicking and whistling sounds. Its mouth moved in ways that human mouths couldn't, creating complex tones that Jake's ears could barely distinguish. Obviously, they didn't share a language. Jake tapped his communicator. "Lisa, Ben, our guest is awake. We need that translation program you were working on." Lisa arrived within minutes, carrying a portable computer and a small device that looked like a microphone. She had been preparing for this moment, studying the data they had recovered from the alien ship and trying to build a translation system. "This might take a while," Lisa warned. She set up the device near the alien and started the program. "The computer needs to learn the language structure. We'll need lots of samples." For the next hour, Lisa pointed at objects and said their names in English. The alien watched with what seemed like curiosity, occasionally making sounds that the computer recorded. Jake brought food and water, though they weren't sure if the alien could eat human food. The creature looked at the offerings but didn't touch them. Gradually, the translation program began to make sense of the alien's language. The first word that came through clearly was a name. "Ven," the computer's voice said. The alien had pointed to itself and repeated the sound several times. "Ven," Jake repeated, pointing at the alien. Then he pointed to himself. "Jake." Ven's eyes brightened, cycling through colors more rapidly. It seemed pleased. Over the next several hours, they built a basic vocabulary. The translation program improved with each exchange, and soon they could have simple conversations. "Thank you," Ven said, through the computer's speakers. The voice was artificial but carried meaning. "You saved Ven's life." Ven was ready for death. "We couldn't just leave you out there," Jake replied. "What happened to your ship?" Ven's explanation came slowly, as the translation program struggled with complex concepts. Ven was a scientist from a species called the Kethal. The ship had been damaged by a sudden solar flare while Ven was investigating an ancient site on a dead planet. The radiation had overwhelmed the ship's shields, and the systems had failed. Ven had sent the distress signal, but never expected anyone to find it in such a remote location. "Why were you out here alone?" Lisa asked. "Seems dangerous for one person." Ven's eyes dimmed, shifting to darker shades. "Ven searches for hope, for salvation. The Kethal are dying." That got everyone's attention. Ben, who had been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. Dying? What do you mean? Ven began to explain, and as the translation improved, the full horror of the situation became clear. 3 generations ago, a genetic mutation had appeared among the Kethal. At first, it seemed harmless, just a small change that didn't affect daily life. But then the children born with the mutation grew up and tried to have children of their own. They couldn't. The mutation caused sterility. Not in everyone, but in most. And it was spreading. Now, 90% of the Kethal population couldn't reproduce. The species was slowly dying out, 1 generation at a time. That's terrible, Jake said quietly. Haven't your scientists found a cure? Ven made a sound that the translator interpreted as bitter laughter. The Kethal have tried everything. Our greatest minds, our most advanced technology, nothing works. The mutation is too complex, too deeply embedded in our genetic code. We have perhaps 2 more generations before there are too few of us to sustain our civilization. So you were searching for ancient technology? Lisa guessed, hoping some older civilization had faced something similar? Yes, Ven confirmed. Ven travels to forbidden places, dangerous places, looking for any clue that might help. But there is nothing. Ven has found only disappointment and nearly died for it. The medical bay fell silent. Jake looked at this small alien who had been searching desperately for a way to save its entire species. The loneliness of that mission was overwhelming. To carry the hopes of billions while knowing that failure meant extinction. Tell me more about this mutation, Lisa said suddenly. How exactly does it work? Ven seemed surprised by the question. Why does a human want to know? Your species cannot help. The Kethal are far more advanced than humans. If we cannot solve this, no one can. Lisa frowned. Maybe, but I'd still like to understand it. I'm an engineer, not a biologist, but I know a little about genetics. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps. Ven hesitated, then began explaining the technical details. The mutation affected the reproductive cells, preventing them from properly bonding during fertilization. It was like a lock had been placed on the genetic material, and nothing the Kethal tried could open it. They had attempted gene therapy, artificial fertilization, cloning, and dozens of other approaches. Nothing worked. As Ven talked, Lisa's expression changed. She started asking more specific questions about the genetic structure, the exact nature of the mutation, and what the Kethal cells looked like at a molecular level. Ven answered as best as the translation program would allow, sometimes using the computer to show diagrams and data. This is going to sound strange, Lisa said slowly, but this reminds me of something I studied in college. There's a fungus on Earth that has a similar genetic lock mechanism. It only reproduces under very specific conditions, and the cells won't bond unless certain environmental factors are present. Ven's eyes brightened with interest. Earth fungus? That is very different from Kethal biology. I know, Lisa said quickly. But the principle might be similar. What if the mutation isn't actually causing sterility? What if it's creating a lock, and you just need to find the right key? Ven was quiet for a moment. The Kethal have never considered this approach. We assumed the mutation was damage that needed to be repaired, but a lock that needs a key. Ven's voice trailed off, thinking. Jake had been listening carefully. An idea was forming in his mind, one that probably was crazy but felt right somehow. Ven, what if we took you to Earth? Our scientists could look at your data with fresh eyes. Maybe they could help. No, Ven said immediately. Humans are too primitive. No offense intended, but your species has only just begun to explore space. You do not have the technology or knowledge to help the Kethal. Maybe not, Jake admitted. But what do you have to lose? You said yourself that you've run out of options. You were ready to die out there in the asteroid field. At least let us try. Ven considered this. The alien's eyes cycled through colors, which Jake was beginning to understand meant deep thought. Finally, Ven spoke. Why would you do this? You do not know the Kethal. We have nothing to offer you. Because it's the right thing to do, Jake said simply. You need help, and we might be able to give it. That's enough. Ben cleared his throat. Jake, can I talk to you outside for a minute? In the corridor, Ben spoke in a low voice. This is crazy. We're cargo haulers, not diplomats or scientists. Taking an alien to Earth is way above our pay grade. There will be questions, regulations, probably military involvement. I know, Jake said. But can you look at Ven and just walk away? An entire species is dying, Ben. If there's even a tiny chance we can help, we have to try. Ben sighed deeply. You're going to get us in so much trouble. You know that, right? Jake smiled. Probably. But you're going to help me anyway. Yeah, Ben admitted. I am, because you're right, and I hate that. They returned to the medical bay where Lisa was still discussing genetic strew. The Wanderer approached Earth after a 2-week journey. During that time, Jake had been making calls, sending messages, and calling in every favor he had ever earned. Getting an alien scientist access to human research facilities was not easy. Most government officials wanted to quarantine Ven immediately. Some wanted to study the alien rather than help it. Jake had to be persistent and sometimes difficult to get what he needed. Finally, he found someone who listened. Dr. Amy Chen worked at the Global Research Institute in Geneva, one of the most advanced scientific facilities on Earth. She specialized in genetics and had a reputation for thinking outside traditional boundaries. When Jake explained the situation, she agreed to meet with Ven, though she made no promises about being able to help. The landing at Geneva's spaceport drew attention. A small crowd of officials, scientists, and security personnel waited as the Wanderer touched down. Jake walked down the ramp first, followed by Ben and Lisa. Then Ven appeared, moving slowly and carefully in the Earth's gravity, which was slightly heavier than what the Kethal were used to. Cameras flashed. People whispered. Ven was the first non-human that many of these people had ever seen in person. The small alien with blue skin and multifaceted eyes looked fragile and vulnerable in the midst of all the attention. Dr. SciFi, Amy Chen, stepped forward, a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and gray streaks in her black hair. She didn't tower over Ven the way some of the others did. Instead, she knelt slightly to be closer to the alien's eye level. Welcome to Earth, Ven, she said clearly. I'm Amy Chen. Captain Morrison has told me about your situation. I'd like to help if I can. Ven's translation device picked up her words and converted them. Dr. Chen is very kind. Ven does not have hope, but Ven appreciates the effort. Let's go somewhere more private, Amy suggested. We can talk properly there. The Global Research Institute was an impressive complex of buildings surrounded by gardens and parks. Amy led them to her laboratory, a large space filled with advanced equipment that even made Ven pause with interest. 2 other scientists were waiting there. This is Dr. Ryan Cooper. Amy introduced a younger man with red hair and an eager expression. He specializes in molecular biology. And this is Dr. Grace Martinez, our cross-species genetics expert. Grace was a tall woman with warm brown skin and a careful, analytical gaze. We've never worked on alien genetics before, she admitted, but we're willing to try. Can you share your people's research with us? Ven connected a data device to their computer system. The information that flowed through contained generations of Kethal research, all their failed attempts and dead ends. It was overwhelming in its complexity and heartbreaking in its futility. The human scientists spent hours reviewing the data. Jake, Ben, and Lisa waited in a nearby lounge, drinking coffee and wondering if this had been a foolish hope after all. How could human science, so new compared to the ancient Kethal civilization, possibly help? Finally, Amy emerged with a thoughtful expression. This is fascinating. The Kethal are incredibly advanced in many ways. But I think Lisa was right. They've been approaching this from the wrong angle. What do you mean? Jake asked. They've been trying to fix the mutation, Amy explained, to remove it or repair the damage it causes. But Lisa's insight about the lock mechanism makes sense. What if the mutation isn't damage at all? What if it's more like a switch that got flipped and they need to flip it back? Ryan joined them, his face flushed with excitement. I've been comparing the Kethal genetic structure to various Earth organisms. There are some remarkable similarities to extremophiles, organisms that thrive in harsh conditions, specifically tardigrades. Water bears? Lisa said, surprised. Those tiny creatures that can survive in space? Exactly, Ryan nodded. Tardigrades have a unique protein that protects their genetic material under extreme stress. They can basically shut down their reproductive processes and restart them when conditions improve. What if the Kethal mutation is doing something similar, but they don't have the mechanism to restart it? Grace added her thoughts. The mutation might have been an evolutionary response to some environmental stress that happened generations ago. The problem is, the stress is gone now, but the genetic lock remains in place. Ven had been listening through the translation device. The alien's eyes were cycling rapidly through colors. This approach has never been considered. The Kethal saw the mutation as an enemy to be destroyed. We never thought it might be a protection that needed to be released. Can you do anything with this theory? Jake asked the scientists. Amy looked at her colleagues. Maybe. It will take time, research, and testing. But yes, I think there's a real possibility here. The work began in earnest. The three human scientists and Ven formed an unusual team, combining knowledge from two different species. They worked long hours, often late into the night. Jake visited daily, bringing food and encouragement. Ben returned to his family but called regularly for updates. Lisa practically moved into the laboratory, fascinated by the work and eager to help however she could. The breakthrough came 2 months into the research. Ryan had been experimenting with tardigrade proteins, trying to modify them for Kethal biology. Most attempts failed. The proteins were rejected by the alien cells or simply had no effect. But then he tried something different. Instead of using the protein directly, he used it as a template to synthesize a similar compound using elements found in Ven's own biology. The synthesized compound unlocked the reproductive cells. In the test samples, fertilization occurred normally, just as it should. The Kethal genetic material, locked for 3 generations, was suddenly free to function as nature had intended. Ryan's hands shook as he ran the test 3 more times. Each time, the result was the same. It worked. He called Amy and Grace immediately. They verified the results, hardly daring to believe it. When they showed Ven, the small alien stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then Ven's legs gave out, and the alien sat down hard on the laboratory floor. The translation device made a sound like sobbing. "Is it real?" Ven asked. "This is not a mistake?" "It's real," Amy said gently. "We've checked it multiple times. The treatment works on the sample cells. Of course, we'll need to do more testing, make sure it's safe for living Kethal, but the principle is sound." Jake arrived to find Ven surrounded by the 3 scientists, all of them smiling, despite the alien's tears. When he heard the news, he felt something release in his chest, a tension he had been carrying for months. "You did it," he said simply. "We did it," Amy corrected. "All of us." Ven provided the data, Lisa had the initial insight, and our team found the solution. This is what happens when different minds work together. Over the next month, they refined the treatment. They tested it extensively on the cell samples Ven had brought, ensuring it was safe and effective. The compound was surprisingly simple once they understood the principle. It worked like a key fitting into a lock, triggering the reproductive cells to function normally again. The hardest part was explaining to Ven that human scientists, from a species the Kethal had considered primitive, had solved in 3 months what the Kethal couldn't solve in 70 years. Ven struggled with this, not from pride, but from disbelief. "How did we miss this?" Ven asked one evening. They were sitting in the laboratory's observation deck, looking out at the stars. "We are so advanced. We have technology beyond human understanding, yet you found the answer when we could not." Jake had joined them for dinner. "Maybe that's exactly why," he suggested. "Sometimes being advanced means you look for complicated solutions. You expect the answer to match your level of sophistication. But sometimes the answer is simple. It's about looking at the problem from a different angle." "The Kethal have become arrogant," Ven said quietly. "We believed our knowledge was superior to all younger species. We did not think to ask for help because we assumed no one could help us. This pride nearly destroyed us." "Nearly," Jake emphasized. "But it didn't. You're going to save your people, Ven. You're going to bring them this cure." Ven's eyes shifted to a pale, soft blue. Ven did nothing. Ven was dying in space. A human cargo pilot saved Ven's life, and human scientists saved Ven's species. The Kethal owe humans a debt that can never be repaid. We don't want repayment, Amy said. We want your people to survive. That's enough. Plans were made to return Ven to the Kethal homeworld. The treatment needed to be presented to their government and medical community. Jake volunteered to escort Ven home, with Lisa joining them. Ben needed to get back to work, but he made Jake promise to tell him everything that happened. Before they left, the Global Research Institute held a small ceremony. Amy presented the journey to the Kethal homeworld would take 5 weeks using standard jump gates and established space routes. The Wanderer had been upgraded with some Kethal navigation data that Ven provided, making the trip safer and more direct than it would have been otherwise. Still, it was a long journey through parts of space that few humans had ever traveled. Jake spent much of the time talking with Ven, learning about Kethal culture and history. The alien opened up during the quiet hours between jumps, sharing stories about the homeworld called Velthar and the people waiting there. Ven spoke of cities built over thousands of years, of art and music that had no human equivalent, and of a civilization that had once been proud but was now facing its end. "What will your people think when you return?" Jake asked one evening. They were in the common area, sharing a meal. Ven had learned to eat some human foods, though the alien still needed special supplements. Ven does not know, Ven admitted. When Ven left to search for answers, many thought it was foolishness. The Grand Council believes the Kethal have tried everything possible. They are preparing for extinction, making plans for the final generation. Some have even chosen to stop living rather than watch the end. The sadness in Ven's voice was clear even through the translation device. Lisa, who was running system checks nearby, looked over with sympathy. "They'll believe you when they see the evidence. The treatment works. We have proof." "But it comes from humans," Ven said. "A species the Kethal barely acknowledge. We have known of Earth for 20 of your years but never made contact because we saw no value in it. To learn that humans saved us when we could not save ourselves, this will be difficult for many to accept." Jake understood the problem. Pride was a universal trait, apparently. "Maybe that's a lesson your people need to learn," he suggested gently. "That being advanced doesn't mean being superior, that everyone has something to offer." Ven's eyes shifted to a thoughtful purple. Jake is wise. Ven hopes the Grand Council will see this truth. As they traveled deeper into Kethal space, they began encountering other ships. Most were cargo vessels like the Wanderer, but larger and more elegant. A few military ships passed by, their sleek forms bristling with technology that made human warships look primitive. None of them challenged the Wanderer once Ven transmitted identification codes. Lisa spent hours studying the Kethal ships through their sensors. "Their technology is incredible. Look at how efficiently those engines run. And their shield systems are at least 50 years ahead of anything we have." 70 years, Ven corrected. "But technology is not everything. The Kethal forgot this. We built wonderful machines but forgot how to ask for help when we needed it." They passed through 2 more jump gates, each one bringing them closer to Velthar. Ven became quieter as they approached, and Jake noticed the alien's eyes stayed in darker shades more often. Ven was nervous, maybe even afraid. "What's wrong?" Jake asked. "Ven is frightened," the alien admitted. "What if the Grand Council refuses the treatment? What if they do not believe? What if pride destroys the Kethal when salvation is in their hands?" "Then we'll convince them," Jake said firmly. "We'll show them the evidence, explain the science. They're rational beings, right? They'll understand." Ven hopes so. Finally, Velthar appeared on their view screen. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The planet was beautiful beyond description. Continents of silver and blue were visible through thin clouds. 3 small moons orbited close, and a ring of crystalline satellites reflected sunlight in brilliant flashes. Space stations dotted the orbital space, each one an architectural wonder. As they descended through the atmosphere, Jake saw the surface in more detail. Forests covered much of the land, but these were not like Earth forests. The trees had silver leaves that caught the light like metal. Cities rose from the forests, their buildings flowing and organic as if they had been grown rather than constructed. Spires reached toward the sky, connected by bridges of light. "It's amazing," Lisa whispered. "This is Velthar," Ven said quietly. "This is home." They landed at a spaceport outside the capital city. The facility was mostly empty, which struck Jake as odd for such an advanced civilization. On Earth, spaceports were always busy with traffic. Here, there were only a few ships, and those looked old and unused. "Where is everyone?" Lisa asked. "There are not many travelers anymore," Ven explained. "The Keth all stay home now, with their families waiting for the end. Why explore the galaxy when your species is dying?" A delegation met them at the landing pad. 6 Kethal adults, all taller than Ven but with the same blue skin and multifaceted eyes. They wore robes of deep purple with silver symbols. Their expressions, as much as Jake could read alien expressions, seemed stern. The leader of the delegation stepped forward. "Ven, scientist of the Outer Research Division, you were believed lost. Your return is unexpected." "Counselor Kethrin," Ven said respectfully. "Ven has returned with important news. Ven has found the cure." The counselor's eyes shifted through several colors rapidly. "That is impossible. The finest minds of the Kethal have searched for generations. You, alone, could not have succeeded." "Ven did not succeed alone," Ven said. "Ven was saved by humans, and human scientists found what we could not." The counselor noticed Jake and Lisa for the first time. Her eyes went very dark, almost black. "Humans? You brought humans to Velthar?" "These humans saved Ven's life and saved the Kethal species," Ven said, straightening to full height despite being smaller than the counselor. "They deserve respect and gratitude." "The Grand Council will decide what they deserve," Kethrin said coldly. "Come. You will present your claims." They were escorted to a vehicle that floated above the ground, without visible means of propulsion. The ride through the city was silent and tense. Jake tried to observe everything, noting the beautiful architecture but also the emptiness. Parks that should have been full of children playing were nearly deserted. Schools stood half-empty. The Kethal they passed looked tired and sad. The Grand Council building was the largest structure Jake had ever seen, a spiraling tower that seemed to reach the clouds. Inside, everything was designed for Kethal proportions, making Jake and Lisa feel like giants. They were led to a circular chamber where 12 Kethal sat in seats, arranged in a ring. These were the Grand Council, the leaders of the entire Kethal civilization. They wore robes of white with gold symbols, and their eyes all fixed on Ven and the 2 humans with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. "Ven, scientist," one of the council members began. "You have been absent for 2 years. During this time, we assumed you had perished like so many others who went searching for impossible solutions. Why have you returned, and why have you brought aliens to our world?" Ven stood in the center of the chamber and began to speak. The alien told the story of the accident, of drifting in space waiting to die, of Jake Morrison answering a distress signal he could have ignored. Ven described the human crew keeping the alien alive through improvised medicine and determination. Then Ven explained Lisa's insight about the genetic lock and how human scientists on Earth had approached the problem from a new angle. Finally, Ven presented the data, the test results, and the treatment itself. The council members examined the evidence, passing data devices between them. Their eyes shifted through colors as they absorbed the information. Jake watched them carefully, trying to gauge their reactions. Some seemed genuinely amazed. Others appeared skeptical or even angry. Finally, one of the council members spoke. "This is remarkable work. If accurate, this treatment could indeed restore fertility to our people, but it comes from humans." He said the word with barely concealed distaste. Humans, who have barely left their own solar system. Humans, who are technologically and socially primitive compared to the Kethal. Humans who solved our problem when we could not, Ven countered. Humans who showed compassion to a dying stranger. Humans who asked for nothing in return. "Why would they help us?" another council member demanded. "What do they want? Technology? Resources? Access to our space?" Jake had been standing quietly, But now he stepped forward. "May I speak?" The council members looked at him with surprise. Apparently, they had not expected the human to address them directly. After a moment, the center counselor nodded. "We helped because it was right," Jake said simply. "Ven needed help. We gave it. Your species was dying. We tried to save you. That's what humans do. We help people, even strangers, even aliens we've never met before. We don't need a reason beyond knowing that someone needs help." "That is illogical," one counselor said. "Resources should not be expended without benefit." "Maybe," Jake agreed, "but it's human. We're not always logical. We care about life, all life, even when it's not practical or profitable. You can call that primitive if you want. We call it being decent." The chamber was silent. The council members looked at each other, communicating in ways Jake couldn't understand. Finally, Counselor Catherine spoke. "The Grand Council will test this treatment. If it works as claimed, the Kethal owe humans a debt beyond measure. If it fails, you will be sent home and we will face our extinction as we have prepared to do." "It will work," Ven said with certainty. "Ven has seen the evidence. This is real hope, not false promises." "Then we shall see," Catherine said. "You will wait while we conduct tests. This may take several days." The news spread across Velthar like wildfire. Within hours of the Grand Council's announcement, every Kethal on the planet knew that a cure had been found. Not just any cure, but one brought by an alien species they had barely acknowledged. The reaction was complex, a mixture of joy, disbelief, and shame. Jake watched from the windows of their quarters as crowds began gathering in the streets. Kethal of all ages came out of their homes, their eyes bright with emotions he was learning to read. Some were celebrating, making musical sounds that filled the air. Others simply stood in silence, processing what this meant for their future. "They're happy," Lisa observed, "but also confused." "The Kethal built their entire identity on being advanced," Ven explained. "To learn that humans, whom we dismissed as primitive, saved us from extinction, this challenges everything we believed about ourselves. It is a difficult truth to accept." The Grand Council moved quickly to implement the treatment. Medical facilities across the planet began preparing to administer it to the sterile population. The synthesized compound was surprisingly easy to mass-produce once the formula was known, another irony that wasn't lost on the Kethal. They had been searching for a complex solution when the answer was relatively simple. Counselor Catherine invited Jake, Lisa, and Ven to observe the first official treatment. They were taken to a medical center in the capital, a building of flowing curves and soft light. A young Kethal couple waited there, their eyes dim with the resignation of those who had given up hope. The female's name was Sela, and her partner was Torn. They had been trying to conceive for 5 years without success. Both carried the mutation that locked their reproductive cells. They had accepted that they would never have children, that their line would end with them. Now they stood before human strangers and Kethal doctors, hoping for a miracle. The treatment was administered through a gentle injection. The compound entered their systems and immediately began working at the cellular level, unlocking the genetic material that had been sealed for so long. Scans showed the changes occurring in real time, the cells responding exactly as the human scientists had predicted. "How long before we know if it worked?" Torn asked, his voice shaking slightly. "The cells are already responding," the Kethal doctor replied. "Within 1 cycle, you will be able to conceive naturally. The lock is broken." Sela's eyes shifted to brilliant white, and she made a sound that Jake recognized as sobbing. Torn held her as they both trembled with emotions too powerful for words. They looked at Jake and Lisa, and despite the language barrier, the gratitude in their eyes was clear. "Thank you," Sela said through a translator. "You have given us a future. You have given us children. How can such a debt ever be repaid?" Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. "We just helped where we could. You don't owe us anything." But to the Kethal, the debt was real and profound. Over the following weeks, thousands of Kethal received the treatment. The medical centers worked around the clock, and the atmosphere on Velthar began to change. The resignation that had hung over the planet like a fog started to lift. Hope returned to faces that had not felt it in years. Jake and Lisa became celebrities of a sort, though they tried to avoid the attention. Everywhere they went, Kethal would stop and stare. Some approached to offer thanks or gifts. Others kept their distance, struggling with the complex emotions of being saved by a species they had considered beneath them. The Grand Council held a formal ceremony to honor the humans and to announce new policies. The entire council gathered in the Great Chamber, and for the first time, it was broadcast across the entire Kethal civilization. Billions watched as Councillor Kethrin stood to speak. For generations, the Kethal have stood alone, she began. We believed our advancement made us superior to younger species. We saw no need for contact or cooperation with others. This pride nearly destroyed us. She paused, letting her words sink in. A human named Jake Morrison answered a distress call he could have ignored. He saved one of our scientists when it would have been easier to continue on his way. That simple act of compassion began a chain of events that saved our entire species. Catherine gestured to where Jake, Lisa, and Ven stood. Human scientists looked at our problem with fresh eyes and found the solution we had missed. They asked for nothing in return. They helped because they believe all life has value, regardless of its origin or level of advancement. The counselor's eyes shifted through several colors before settling on a deep, humble blue. The Kethal have learned a profound lesson. Wisdom does not come only from advancement. Compassion is not a weakness. And cooperation between species is not just beneficial, it is necessary for survival. She announced the formation of the Morrison Initiative, named after Jake. It would be a program dedicated to building bridges between species, sharing knowledge freely, and helping younger civilizations develop. The Kethal would no longer stand isolated and proud. They would engage with the galactic community as partners and friends. Ven was appointed as the director of the initiative, a role that surprised the small scientist but felt right. Ven had experienced firsthand what cooperation between species could accomplish. Who better to lead this new direction for the Kethal? As the ceremony concluded, Jake was approached by many council members. Some thanked him with genuine warmth. Others struggled to hide their discomfort at owing humans such a tremendous debt. He treated them all with the same respect, understanding that change was hard, especially for a species that had viewed itself as superior for so long. That evening, Ven took Jake and Lisa to a special place, a garden on the outskirts of the capital. It was a memorial to all the Kethal who had died during the search for a cure, scientists and explorers who had ventured into dangerous places hoping to save their species. Ven would have been one of them, the alien said quietly. Another name on this memorial if Jake had not stopped to help. Now Ven lives to see the Kethal saved. They stood in silence among the crystalline markers, each one representing a life lost in the desperate search for hope. Jake thought about all the small choices that had led to this moment. If he had ignored the distress signal, if Lisa hadn't made the connection to Earth fungi, if the human scientists hadn't been willing to try, all of these Kethal on the memorial would have died for nothing. Their species would have ended. Do you think they would be happy with how things turned out? Jake asked. Yes, Ven said with certainty. They died hoping for a solution. The fact that it came from unexpected sources would not matter to them. Only that the Kethal survive. Over the next month, the transformation of Velthar continued. The first pregnancies were confirmed, Kethal couples who had been sterile for years now expecting children. The news was celebrated across the planet. Schools that had been preparing to close began planning for new students. Businesses that had been winding down started investing in the future again. Jake and Lisa prepared to return to Earth. They had been away for months, and Jake knew Ben would be wondering what had happened to them. The Wanderer had been maintained and upgraded by Kethal engineers as a thank you, given technology that would make it one of the fastest independent vessels in human space. Before they left, Sela and Torn came to visit. Sela's pregnancy was now confirmed, one of the first successful conceptions since the treatment began. They brought a gift, a small crystal that glowed with soft blue light. This is a life stone, Torn explained. It is given to those who save lives or perform great deeds. We want you to have it, to remember that you gave us our child and our future. Jake accepted the crystal carefully. I'll treasure this, and I hope your child has a wonderful life. We will name them after you, Sella said. If we have a son, he will be called Morrison in the Kethal way. So your name will live in our family forever. The gesture moved Jake deeply. He had never sought recognition or reward for helping Ven. It had simply been the right thing to do. But knowing that his name would be carried by a Kethal child, one of the first of the new generation that would save the species, that meant something profound. On their last day on Velthar, the Grand Council held a private meeting with Jake, Lisa, and Ven. Counselor Catherine presented them with gifts and honors, but also with something more important. Humanity will always be welcome among the Kethal, she announced. We propose a formal alliance between our species. The Kethal have much to offer in terms of technology and knowledge. Humans have shown us the value of compassion and fresh perspective. Together, we can accomplish more than either species alone. I'm just a cargo pilot, Jake said. I can't speak for all of humanity. Perhaps not officially, Catherine agreed, but you represent what is best about your species. We will send ambassadors to Earth to formalize this alliance. We hope humans will accept our friendship, despite how we treated them before. I think they will, Lisa said. Humans are pretty forgiving. And we're always interested in making new friends. As the Wanderer prepared to depart, thousands of Kethal gathered at the spaceport to see them off. It was more people than Jake had seen in one place during his entire visit. They were all there to say goodbye to the humans who had saved them. Ven stood at the base of the Wanderer's ramp, their eyes cycling through colors that Jake now understood meant deep emotion. Ven will miss Jake and Lisa. You are more than friends. You are family. The return journey to Earth felt different. The Wanderer flew faster and smoother with its Kethal upgrades, cutting the travel time nearly in half. But more than that, Jake felt changed by what he had experienced. He had left Earth as a simple cargo pilot and was returning as someone who had helped save an entire species from extinction. Lisa spent much of the journey documenting everything that had happened, writing detailed reports about Kethal technology, culture, and biology. She knew this information would be valuable when humans and Kethal began their formal alliance. But she also wrote about the emotional journey, about watching a dying species find hope again. Do you think things will really change? She asked Jake one evening. Between humans and the Kethal, I mean. They spent so long thinking they were better than us. I think they already have changed, Jake replied. Catherine meant what she said about pride nearly destroying them. Sometimes you need to hit bottom before you can start climbing back up. When they finally reached Earth, they found that news of their adventure had preceded them. The story had spread through official channels and unofficial gossip. Jake Morrison, the cargo pilot who had saved an alien and helped cure a dying species, was suddenly famous in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. Ben was waiting at the spaceport with a huge grin on his face. You're a celebrity now. How does it feel? Weird, Jake admitted. I just did what anyone would do. That's where you're wrong, Ben said. Most people wouldn't have stopped for that distress signal. They would have been too busy, too cautious, or too focused on their own problems. You stopped because you're a good person. Own it. The human government wanted to debrief them, and the media wanted interviews. Jake did his best to handle it all with grace, but he kept emphasizing that this wasn't about him. It was about cooperation between species, about looking past differences, and about the value of compassion. Dr. Amy Chen and her team were celebrated as heroes of science. Their work had not only saved the Kethal, but had also advanced human understanding of genetics in unexpected ways. The techniques they developed would have applications in human medicine for generations to come. 3 months after Jake's return, the Kethal delegation arrived on Earth. It was the first official contact between the two species, and the event was broadcast worldwide. 5 Kethal ships landed at the Geneva spaceport, their elegant design drawing gasps from the watching crowds. Ven led the delegation, now wearing the robes of a Kethal director. The small alien had grown in confidence and authority, but the eyes still brightened with joy when they saw Jake waiting in the crowd. The alliance was formalized with much ceremony. Human and Kethal leaders signed agreements to share knowledge, trade freely, and support each other in times of need. The Kethal offered access to their advanced technology, while humans offered their unique perspective and the one thing the Kethal valued most: genuine friendship. As part of the agreement, the Morrison Initiative officially opened its first office on Earth. Ven would split time between both worlds, building bridges and fostering cooperation. Young scientists from both species would work together, learning from each other and combining their strengths. Jake attended the ceremony but tried to stay in the background. He had never wanted fame or recognition. But Ven found him afterward and pulled him aside. "Ven has something to show Jake," the alien said, eyes cycling through excited colors. They went to a quiet room where Ven pulled up a holographic display. It showed Velthar, but different from when Jake had visited. The cities were fuller now, with more people in the streets. But what caught his attention were the parks and playgrounds, now filled with small Kethal children playing and learning. "The first generation," Ven said softly, "born after the cure. Already there are thousands of them, and more are born every day. In 10 years, there will be millions. The Kethal will not just survive, they will thrive." Jake watched the children play, their small forms chasing each other and making the musical sounds of Kethal laughter. Every one of them existed because he had answered a distress call. "There is more," Ven continued, switching the display. Now it showed other aliens, species Jake had never seen before. The Morrison Initiative has already helped 3 other civilizations with problems they could not solve alone. One species was facing a food shortage, another needed help with a disease, the third was struggling with environmental damage. We helped them all. "That's wonderful," Jake said, genuinely pleased. "It exists because of you," Ven insisted, "because you showed the Kethal that helping others, even strangers, even those you consider different, is not weakness. It is strength. It is the highest calling of any advanced species." Over the following years, the alliance between humans and Kethal grew stronger. Human ships began using Kethal technology, exploring farther into space than ever before. Kethal scientists worked alongside humans, their different approaches complementing each other perfectly. What one species missed, the other often caught. Jake returned to his work as a cargo pilot, though now his ship was one of the finest in human space. He took contracts that brought him to Velthar regularly, and each visit showed him more changes. The planet was alive again, vibrant with the energy of a species that had been given a second chance. On one visit, 5 years after the cure was found, Jake was invited to a school ceremony. Children who had been born in the first generation were now old enough to attend their first day of formal education. Among them was a young Kethal named Morrison, the son of Sella and Torn. The small child looked up at Jake with curious, multifaceted eyes. "You are the human Ven tells stories about. The one who answered the signal." "That's me," Jake confirmed, kneeling to be closer to the child's level. "Teacher says you saved all of us," young Morrison said. "Every Kethal child owes our life to you." Jake shook his head gently. "No, you owe your life to your parents, to the scientists who found the cure, to everyone who didn't give up hope. I just helped a little bit." "Ven says humans always say that," Morrison replied, with what Jake had learned to recognize as a Kethal smile. "That they help and then say it was nothing. But it was everything to us." Watching the children enter their school, Jake felt a profound sense of peace. His life had changed in ways he never could have imagined, all because he had made one simple choice: to help someone in need. Years later, when Jake was older and had retired from active piloting, he was invited back to Velthar for a special ceremony. The first generation of children born after the cure were now adults themselves, and many were having children of their own. The second generation of Kethal, who would never have existed without the cure. The Grand Council had established a memorial, not to those who had died searching for the cure, but to celebrate those who had lived because the cure was found. At the center stood a statue, carefully crafted from crystalline material. It depicted 3 figures: a Kethal scientist being helped by 2 humans, 1 male and 1 female. The inscription below was in both Kethal and English. In memory of the moment when one species reached out to help another, asking nothing in return. May we never forget that compassion is the greatest technology, and kindness the highest advancement. Jake stood before the statue with Lisa beside him. They were both older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces earned from years of travel and adventure. Ben had passed away 2 years earlier, but they knew he would have loved to see this. "We did something good," Lisa said quietly. "We did," Jake agreed. Ven approached them, moving slower now but still energetic. The small alien had aged too, working tirelessly for the Morrison Initiative for decades. Under Ven's direction, the initiative had helped dozens of species, solving problems and building connections across the galaxy. "Jake, Lisa, thank you for coming," Ven said. "Ven wanted you to see this, to know that your actions echo across generations." "How many Kethal are there now?" Jake asked. 3 billion and growing, Ven replied. "In another generation we will reach our historical population levels. But more important than numbers, the Kethal have changed. We are no longer isolated and proud. We work with others. We help where we can. We learned from humans what it means to be truly advanced." A group of young Kethal approached, students studying at the Morrison Initiative. They asked Jake questions about that day in the asteroid field, about the decision to stop and help. They wanted to understand the thinking behind it, to learn how to make similar choices in their own lives. "There wasn't much thinking involved," Jake told them honestly. "Someone needed help. I had the ability to help. That was all the reason I needed. But you risked resources, time, even danger," one student pressed. "For a stranger you had never met. That's what makes us stronger," Jake explained. "Not just humans, but all of us. When we help each other without asking what we get in return, we build something bigger than ourselves. We build a community, a civilization based on compassion instead of just power." The students listened carefully, and Jake could see them processing this idea. They were growing up in a different Kethal culture than their ancestors had known, one shaped by the lesson that cooperation was strength, not weakness. That evening, there was a celebration. Thousands of Kethal gathered to mark the anniversary of the cure, and Jake was the guest of honor despite his protests. They shared food, music, and stories. Young Kethal children performed dances, and Jake was moved to see how vibrant and alive they all were. Sella and Torn were there with their son Morrison, who was now a scientist himself, working on ways to help other species facing genetic problems. He had dedicated his life to paying forward the gift that had been given to his people. "Your name means something special among the Kethal now," Morrison told Jake. "To call someone Morrison means they are compassionate, helpful, willing to stop for a stranger. It is the highest compliment we have." Jake didn't know what to say to that. His name had become part of another species' language, a symbol of the best qualities any being could have. It was humbling and overwhelming. As the celebration wound down, Jake stood alone for a moment, looking up at Velthar's night sky. 3 moons hung overhead, and the stars were bright and clear. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, starting with a simple distress signal in an asteroid field. He had been just a cargo pilot trying to make an honest living. He hadn't set out to save a species or change the galaxy. He had simply seen someone who needed help and decided to help them. Everything else had followed from that one moment of compassion. Lisa joined him, following his gaze to the stars. "Thinking about that day?" "Always," Jake admitted. "I wonder sometimes what would have happened if I had ignored that signal. If I had decided we were too busy or it was too risky." "The Kethal would have died out," Lisa said bluntly. "Ven would be just another name on a memorial. All those children we saw today wouldn't exist. The Morrison Initiative wouldn't exist. Dozens of other species that have been helped wouldn't have received that help. All from one choice," Jake marveled. "All from one good person making the right choice," Lisa corrected. "That's the real lesson here, Jake. One person can make a difference. One act of kindness can change everything." They stood together under alien stars, 2 humans who had helped save a species, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy what humanity truly was. Not the most advanced species, not the most powerful, but one that valued life and believed that everyone, no matter how different, deserved a chance to survive and thrive. In the years that followed, the story of Jake Morrison and the Kethal became legend. It was taught in schools across dozens of worlds, a reminder that advancement wasn't measured in technology or power, but in compassion and willingness to help others. Young people of many species grew up hearing about the cargo pilot who stopped for a stranger and changed the fate of billions. The Morrison Initiative continued to grow, helping species across the galaxy and fostering cooperation that made everyone stronger. The alliance between humans and Kethal became a model for others, showing that different civilizations could work together as equals, each bringing their unique strengths to solve problems neither could face alone. And at the heart of it all was one simple truth that Jake Morrison had understood from the beginning: that the measure of any civilization, any species, any individual is found in how they treat those who need help. In that moment in the asteroid field, when Jake heard a distress call and chose to answer it, he had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or weapons or knowledge. It was the simple, profound act of caring about others and being willing to help, no matter the cost. That was the legacy that would endure long after Jake was gone. A legacy not of conquest or domination, but of compassion and cooperation. A legacy that proved that sometimes the smallest action from one person could echo across the stars and change the fate of entire civilizations. And that, in the end, was the most powerful force in the universe. "We'll miss you too," Lisa said, hugging the small alien carefully. "But we'll see each other again. You're coming to Earth for the Alliance talks, right?" "Yes," Ven confirmed, "and Ven hopes Jake will visit Velthar again. There is much to show you, and many who want to thank you properly." Jake shook Ven's hand in the Kethal way, a gentle pressing of palms. "Take care of your people. They're lucky to have you." "The Kethal are lucky to have humans," Ven replied. "You saved us when we could not save ourselves. That is a gift that can never be fully repaid, but we will try every day to be worthy of it." The Wanderer lifted off, rising through Velthar's atmosphere while thousands of Kethal watched and celebrated. As the planet shrank behind them, Jake looked at the life stone that Sella and Torn had given him. It still glowed softly, a constant reminder of what a simple act of kindness could accomplish. Yes, Jake, Lisa, and Ven were given quarters in a building near the council chambers. The rooms were comfortable but clearly designed for Kethal, making everything feel slightly wrong in size and shape. They waited anxiously, wondering if the council would accept the truth or let pride destroy them. On the third day, Catherine came to their quarters personally. Her eyes were bright, cycling rapidly through shades of blue and white. "It works," she said simply. "The treatment works. Fertilization occurred in all test subjects. The genetic lock has been released." She looked at Jake and Lisa. "You have saved us. The Kethal live because humans cared enough to try." Ven's eyes shifted to the brightest white Jake had ever seen, and the alien made a sound of pure joy that needed no translation. "And with the complete research data and enough of the synthesized compound to begin immediate treatments." She also gave Ven something else, a small vial containing live tardigrades. "These little creatures helped save your species," Amy explained. "Keep them as a reminder that wisdom can come from the smallest and most unexpected places." Ven held the vial carefully, watching the microscopic animals floating in their solution. "Ven will treasure this always. Ven will tell the story of how the smallest Earth creatures held the key to the Kethal's survival." As the Wanderer prepared to depart, Jake looked back at Earth. His simple decision to answer a distress call had led to this moment. He was just a cargo pilot who couldn't ignore someone in trouble. Now he was about to travel to an alien world to witness the rebirth of an entire species. Lisa noticed his expression. "Having second thoughts?" "No," Jake said. "Just thinking about how strange life is. A few months ago, my biggest concern was delivering cargo on time. Now I'm helping save a species from extinction." "That's because you're a good person," Lisa said. "You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That's all it took." Jake smiled. "Let's hope the Kethal see it that way too." Tours with Ven. Jake made his announcement. "We're taking you to Earth. Lisa thinks human scientists might be able to help, and I trust her instincts." Ven's eyes shifted to a bright, almost white color. Jake wasn't sure, but he thought it might be the Kethal equivalent of tears. "Ven does not understand this kindness. We are strangers, different species. Yet you risk much to help." "That's what humans do," Lisa said with a smile. We help people, even if those people are blue and have really cool eyes. For the first time since waking up, Ven made a sound that needed no translation. It was laughter, high and musical. The small alien looked at the three humans who had saved its life and were now offering to help save its entire species. Ven didn't have much hope, but at least there was a chance now. And chance was more than Ven had when drifting alone in the asteroid field, waiting to die. The Wanderer changed course, heading for Earth. Jake filed the necessary reports, though he left out most of the details. There would be time to explain everything when they arrived. For now, he focused on keeping Ven comfortable and letting Lisa continue her discussions about genetics and biology. Ben piloted the ship with his usual skill, though he kept muttering about how this was the most complicated cargo delivery in history. None of them knew it yet. But Jake's decision to help a dying stranger would change not just the fate of the Kethal, but the future of humanity itself. G calculations. Jake looked at the dying alien on the medical bed. He had made the decision to stop and help, and now their lives were connected. If Lisa couldn't find a way to save this creature, he would have to live with that. But he had to try. Do whatever you need to do, he told Lisa. Use anything from the cargo. I'll deal with the consequences later. Lisa nodded and got to work. Ben joined her, and together, they spent the night synthesizing compounds, testing them, and adjusting the formula. Jake stayed in the medical bay, watching over their unexpected passenger. He talked to the alien even though it couldn't hear him, telling it to hold on, that they were trying to help. As the hours passed, Jake wondered about this being. Where did it come from? What was it doing out here alone? Did it have a family waiting somewhere? The questions filled his mind, but all that mattered right now was keeping it alive. By dawn, Lisa had created something that might work. They administered it carefully, watching the monitors for any reaction. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the alien's breathing began to steady. The red symbols on its suit started to fade to yellow, then green. It's working, Lisa whispered. Jake felt relief wash over him. They had done it. The alien was stabilizing. Now all they could do was wait and hope that when it woke up, they could find a way to communicate. He had saved a stranger's life today, not knowing that this simple act of kindness would change everything.